Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar about how the UK's ports, particularly the Port of Felixstowe, supports exporters. It's brought to you by the Institute of Export and International Trade in partnership with Hutchison Ports. My name is William Barnes-Graham, the Senior Content Editor at the Institute, and I will be your host for the next 45 minutes or so. And it's great to see so many of you on today's webinar already. This isn't a topic we've covered before, so I hope, like me, you're excited to hear more about one of this country's most significant ports in what is the first in a bit of a series we're doing with Hutchison Ports. If we can move to the next slide, please. Here you will see that we have two fantastic speakers today from both the Institute and Hutchison. Later on, we'll be hearing from Adam Ramsey, the Head of Commercial at the Port of Felixstowe. He'll be talking about the support that the port provides to exporters. Before Adam, though, we'll be hearing from our webinar regular in Kevin Shakespeare, the Director of the Institute's Academy. Kevin will be setting the scene, talking through some trade considerations businesses need to be making. Hi, Kevin, how are you? And why do you think webinars like this one are so important?
Well, first of all, Will, I'm very good, thank you, and I hope everyone attending today is well. Yeah, and as Will has said, this is sort of slightly different topic to some areas that we covered previously, but it's an absolute pleasure to be able to present today with Hutchison Ports and Adam, and just like to mention that first of all. I think it's important because when we trade, we don't always think of the importance of ports, carriers, shipping lines to actually international trade. So certainly the way I've tried to frame my section today is looking at best practice and examples of best practice when you are exporting, importing, and using the very important deep sea port of Felixstowe. Thank you.
Fantastic. Yeah, every part of the supply chain is absolutely fundamental. So that's a very exciting webinar as noted. But if we move on to the next slide, before we get properly started, we're going to run a very quick poll. This is just to find out a little bit about you, our audience. So the first poll is, which of these best describes your business? And the options there are haulier, exporter or importer, shipping line, freight forwarder, or other. Now, while you are answering that poll, just a couple of housekeeping notes. Firstly, you can contact me with any comments or questions using the question panel on the control window to the right-hand side of your screen. We hope to get to a number of your questions towards the end of the webinar, though please bear in mind we have already received a fair few questions in advance, so we won't be able to get to everything today, but we'll try our best. If you feel as though your question has not been answered, please do review our technical helpline or training and consultancy offerings, which we'll be talking about later in the webinar. And as a quick tip with questions, if you can make them concise and easy for me to read, that's always very much appreciated. Secondly, you will receive access to today's slide pack and a recording of the webinar in a follow-up email we will be sending over the next day or so. So please do try to listen in as carefully as you can to today's presentation. You can also download the PDF in the handouts drop-down and the GoToWebinar panel. So that's my housekeeping notes. I'm going to very quickly close the poll and share the results. So a fair few exporters or importers on the line today. I guess that's not surprising. That is our usual audience. Not too many hauliers or freight forwarders, a few freight forwarders, no shipping lines, and a fair few in the other, interestingly. So yeah, a mix of you, and hopefully this is interesting to all of you. But that's enough of me. I think on the next slide, it's over to Kevin.
Thank you again, Will, and good morning again, everybody, and thank you very much for completing the poll. So just in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about some considerations and what best practice can look like with regard to exporting and importing. So if we have a next slide, please. So first of all, I'd like to sort of think about elements in terms of getting paid, but also think about this in how trade is all joined up. Exporting, importing is all joined up. You can't separate payment terms from transport terms, Incoterms, international commercial terms, and you can't separate it from how documentation is completed. So businesses have to act in their entirety. So clearly, businesses should only negotiate appropriate payment terms after due diligence and effective credit control. And that's not just for the exporter. That due diligence also applies for importers carrying out due diligence on overseas suppliers. Do recognize there is a relationship between Incoterms and payment terms, and areas such as where control is passes the goods pass in the actual supply chain, depending on the Incoterms. Recognize the importance of the role of the bill of lading as a document of title, where it has unique roles in international trade. So when you pass control of the bill of lading, that has to be in line with the payment terms agreed. Also recognize the currency control requirements in the overseas country. It could mean if there are currency controls, exchange control regulations, that payment may take longer. And in many countries of the world, including the likes of India, there are currency control regulations in place, which normally require that documentation has to be approved by the central bank of the country concerned before money is allowed out of the country. So things like pre-shipment inspections, commercial invoices, transport documents, customs declarations have to be presented by an authorized bank in the country to the central bank. And clearly make sure that your commercial invoice has full details, and commercial invoice clearly needs to cover key elements. So it's required clearly as part of the customs declaration, so it must have essential information such as commodity codes, origin, obviously a customs valuation, also gross net weight of the goods. Clearly, it must have the payment terms and bank account details on. So again, this is how documentation, Incoterms, payment terms are all interrelated in the trade transaction. So it's important in a business that everybody is working together in sync. The finance department, the shipping department, export department, commercial, customer service department, etc. So if we have a next slide, please. So in other elements of export best practice, and you may have heard me say this before, but the importance of having full proof of export file, also full proof of import file as well. So you have a file for every transaction, an export or an import, and that has every piece of documentation in that file, again, from the quotation, pro forma invoice, commercial invoice, transport documents, evidence of the customs declaration, and also evidence that the overseas buyer has received the goods as well. So as much as you can get, and clearly if that information is held electronically, it should be backed up as well in case of need. Also understand the requirements for placing goods on the overseas market, and it's become more visible now for GB exporters post-Brexit, in suddenly we're thinking about different requirements to achieve the EU CE marking, to things like export health certificates for products of animal origin, phytosanitary certificates for plants, vegetables, flowers, for example. So really knowing what is required, and it's not just documentation for the European Union, it's also required for trading across borders, also with the rest of the world. Ensure you have the correct insurance for carriage of goods, cargo insurance in place. So it becomes absolutely vital. And there are some businesses that may be considered a carrier, the forwarder will pay out in the event of damage to the goods, delays in goods, etc. But the carriers have limited liability under international statute, which means that you need full cargo insurance for your goods, and be clear on who is responsible for the cargo insurance. Don't just assume that an Incoterm means insurance is definitely the responsibility of one party or the other. Be very, very clear on who is responsible for the insurance. And also just want to bring out in the context of Incoterms 2020 that there were changes to the insurance within the Incoterms, effectively where CIF, which was deemed to be used more for commodities, remains a recommendation of Institute Cargo Clause C, whereas CIP, which was deemed to be used for more for importing, exporting, trading goods was Institute Cargo Clause A. So be aware of those recommendations if you are using those two Incoterms, which are probably used more for trade with the rest of the world. Maybe not so much for the EU, but definitely for trade with the rest of the world. If we have a next slide, please. So another thing I want to bring out is consistency between customs declarations is absolutely vital as well. And clearly the first 6 digits are harmonized across the world in the HS harmonized system codes. But and then you have digits 7, 8, 9, 10, which are added on for exports and imports. But when I say consistency, customs authorities now are with electronic exchange transfers effectively are a lot more effective now than they used to be. So it is possible for customs authorities to track the declarations from export to import. So clearly there has to be consistency in the commodity codes used from both the export side of a transaction and the import side of the transaction. And clearly if there are additional methods such as anti-dumping duties, there can be additional codes required and digits. And also, again, if there's any inexperienced or less familiar importers or exporters on the call, do be aware that the actual customs declaration, every part of it, including the commodity code, the origin, the valuation of goods, is your responsibility, not the responsibility of the forwarder or agent, unless they are acting as an indirect representative, which is rare, it's feasible. Otherwise, it would be your responsibility. So you have to provide that information to the forwarder or agent if they are making the customs declaration on your behalf. If we have a next slide, please. So the final slide I want to bring out, and we've seen a lot increased use of this post-Brexit in 2021, is use of custom special procedures. So for example, goods imported from the likes of China, India, and then exported to the European Union. And clearly it is now an export from 2021 to the EU, which gives possibilities in terms of the import side in using the likes of inward processing if there is a processing procedure taking place, say taking raw materials, semi-finished goods and producing finished goods, and customs warehousing if it's more distribution type businesses. But we can see from our example here that just a monthly import, say from China, subject to 4% import tariff, by using special procedures upon re-export to the EU, then effectively the import duty and the import VAT is eliminated. So just on our simple example on screen, it's a $24,000 saving per annum. So inward processing could also be, if you're processing, could also be sufficient processing to meet the rules of origin, albeit that is a complex area and not straightforward under the EU Trade and Cooperation Agreement. So certainly Institute, we have seen a lot more take up use of custom special procedures by businesses because of the cost savings and the efficiencies that it can introduce. If we have the next slide, please. So I'd just like to sum up here by saying, and the Institute now has now nearly or just over 5,000 business members, is we are seeing a great surge in use of our services with our technical helpline, our training courses, our lunchtime learning sessions. So we have a lot of resource at the Institute to support businesses trade and also support the wider trade community as well. So to ensure the trade community links up from the shipping lines, the freight forwarders, the hauliers, the importers, exporters, and also those involved in whether you work for a bank, whether you work for the Department for International Trade. We provide a lot of support at the Institute. I'll now pass back to Will. Thank you.
Thanks, Gavin. As ever, a great overview of some of the trade implications, particularly around using ports, but throughout best practice throughout anyway, in terms of any aspect of exporting, is always useful to reiterate the importance of things like record keeping and stuff like that. Absolutely fundamental. So move to the next slide. I'm going to do our second poll, and this is obviously to get a bit of a sense, we're about to hear from Port of Felixstowe, to get a bit of a sense on kind of what you know about the support they provide currently. So the question is, how much do you currently know about the Port of Felixstowe? The options range from nothing at all, a little, a reasonable amount, would like to know more, quite a bit, although I'm keen to stay updated, and finally, I feel well informed and know where to look for information. Just while people are answering that poll, we've already had a few good questions in. Kevin, first one is from Martin, who's asked, you're talking about the licenses and certificates that traders need to get as part of the documentation, but where can businesses find out what sorts of documents they need to get and how they can get those documents?
First of all, thank you. That's a good question. It's one we get quite a lot. I think there's a couple of things that businesses need to consider. One, what the nature of their business is. So what product do you have? Is it a product of animal origin? Is it plants, vegetables, fruits, etc.? Are your goods possibly have a military purpose, a dual use good, as well as a civilian purpose? Are they dangerous goods, chemicals? So it's very important. And then, I mean, you have a couple of options open to you. You can, there is information on gov.uk, so but you would then obtain that based on the nature of the goods that you are moving. If you're a member of the Institute, obviously you're welcome to contact the Institute. We get lots of questions on what certificates, licenses are required. So those are sort of some of the options, but first of all, reflect on the nature of your business. What goods are you carrying, but also where are the goods being sent to or coming from, because that will have an influence. So depending which part of the world you are selling those goods to, there will be different licensing and certification requirements depending on the product. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. I hope that's helpful, Martin. And there's plenty of support out there, I think is one of the main points there. So if I close that poll, we'll have a few more questions for Kevin later. So we'll share the results. And I suppose probably not too surprisingly, there's a range of awareness about the Port of Felixstowe here. Quite a lot of you know at least a little, so 44%, 21% know a reasonable amount, 23% nothing at all, 11% quite a bit, but only for 1% very well informed, which I suppose does make a bit of sense. So any surprises? Well, this is a great time to bring on our next speaker. So Adam, any surprises in that response? Is that about what you'd expect?
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Yes, what I expect. I actually ticked a little as well, so we're all together there.
Great stuff.
And we've kept this very basic level to give a general introduction, but of course, either connecting to us directly or via the Institute of Export and International Trade, we'd be happy to answer any further questions going forwards, if not today, in the future.
Thanks, Adam. But I'll hide the poll response. Just a quick heads up on questions. We will have a fair bit of time for questions later on, so please do feel free to ask away. Just one quick note though, we tend to, on these webinars, prioritise practical questions around trade and exporting. So what we don't do so much is speculative questions or questions around government policy and stuff like that. So just, yeah, as long as it's relatively export focused, that'd be great. But without any further ado, on the next slide, I believe it's Adam's first. So over to you, Adam.
Yeah, thanks very much, Will. Good morning, everybody. My name is Adam Ramsey, and I'm the head of commercial for the Port of Felixstowe. So it's Britain's biggest and busiest container port. Certainly one of the things I've noticed during the past 18 months of trying to navigate the sea of challenges presented to our industry as a result of COVID is just how fragile and interdependent it is. Also, through my work in the port's commercial team and through the daily questions we're asked by the UK's importers and exporters, I'm sometimes surprised at how little some businesses understand about the supply chain on which they're so reliant. So the Port of Felixstowe has partnered with experts in the field at the Institute of International Trade to present a series of autumn seminars designed to help assist UK exporters or potential exporters to understand their industry better. Next slide, please. So each month, an expert from Hutchison Ports UK will present a seminar on a subject important to UK exporters. So firstly, today, I'll provide just a simple overview of the Port of Felixstowe. Later this month, Martin Waugh, the Port's Senior Commercial Manager for Rail, he will talk about the growing importance of rail and how it may assist your business. October, we'll see Paul Davey, our Head of Corporate Affairs. He'll revisit the UK's second biggest news story over the past few years after COVID, and that's Brexit. And then finally, Mark Taylor, the Director of Hutchison Logistics and the Acting CEO for Freeport East, will provide an update on the Port of Felixstowe and Harwich's successful bid for Freeport status. So next slide, please. So firstly, a little bit more about the Port of Felixstowe. Next slide. So the Port of Felixstowe is owned and operated by Hutchison Ports, who are part of the Hong Kong-based CK Hutchison Group. They're a global conglomerate with investments in areas as diverse as retail, energy, infrastructure, telecoms, finance, and of course ports. CKH is one of the largest foreign inward investors in Britain, owning a number of well-known UK brands you can see on the screen there. And it's this backing that's provided the stable platform on which Felixstowe has grown over many years. Next slide, please. So through our parent company, Felixstowe is part of a global terminal network of 52 ports in 26 countries, so vastly experienced to help you move your export cargo. Next slide, please. And then focusing on Europe, we've got 12 ports in the regional network, all with close access to the major shipping lines. So many of you will be familiar with the Far East to Europe hub ports of Felixstowe or Rotterdam. But in addition to this, we continue to grow across Europe, providing strategic links to both the north and the south of the continent, and critically inland to the hinterland networks of each of the countries and beyond. And then finally, within the UK from a short sea perspective, as well as the container services operated out of Felixstowe, another Hutchison Ports UK terminal, London Thames Port, is a growing force in European short sea traffic, whilst both the Port of Felixstowe and Harwich International Port provide a number of daily connections to Vlaardingen and Rotterdam via roll-on, roll-off ferry. Next slide, please. So for those of you who are less familiar with the part a sleepy little Suffolk seaside town plays in keeping the UK's cargo moving, here are some high-level stats about the scale and the importance of Port of Felixstowe to the UK. Our 9 berths, including 4 deep sea berths capable of handling the largest vessels afloat today, handle around 4 million TEU of containers per year, with a single TEU being the industry standard measurement of space in terms of a 20-foot container. Felixstowe is about as large as the next 2 biggest UK container terminals added together and accounts for approximately 40% of all UK containerised trade traffic. In fact, this increases to close to 60% when looking at the key supply chain of the Far East of Europe or UK. Next slide, please. Handling volume of this scale across its key means Felixstowe requires industry-leading systems and infrastructure to support the delivery and collection of containers on behalf of the importers and exporters of the UK. So from a landside perspective, our terminal gates are open 7 days a week, processing over 22,000 hauliers, delivering and collecting around 33,000 containers every week. Alongside this, our rail operation across our 3 dedicated rail freight terminals processes an impressive 74 trains per day, offering a reliable, cost-effective and green solution to take about 12,500 containers per week off the UK road network. Next slide, please. And again, please. So the question is, who are our customers? And the answer is quite simply, it's you. Anybody looking to ship a container into or out of the UK is our customer, directly or otherwise. All of the familiar names shown on this slide are vital partners in enabling this trade for the tens of thousands of end users who are out there today. It's this choice that makes Felixstowe such a great solution for your exporting needs. The port keeps a directory on our website where you can find contact details for many of the names above, alongside a range of other freight forwarders, agents and trusted suppliers. In addition, the Felixstowe Port Users Association is also an excellent trade body created to promote and support business via Felixstowe. They too have got a great list of contacts should you wish to reach out to them. Next slide, please. So why should an exporter choose Felixstowe? Next slide, please. I've already talked about the size, scale, backing and experience of Felixstowe, making an ideal partner for your export cargo. But what else is it that sets it apart? During 2020, the Port of Felixstowe connected to over 160 countries across the globe, either directly or via transshipment, through all of the world's biggest shipping lines and alliances. This gives an exporter a huge market to tap into. And closer to home, Brexit and near sourcing appears to be driving a growing short sea network between the UK and Europe via both containers and ro-ro. This means Felixstowe gives exporters the choice to get their cargo quickly and reliably to their chosen market. Finally, before you export from Felixstowe, you need to get your container packed into our gates. Here, Felixstowe offers the strongest local network of experienced haulage operators and agents in the UK, whilst our rail operation, in partnership with the country's 3 largest container freight operators, continues to grow, offering reliable, cost-effective and green connectivity. If you need support with consolidation or deconsolidation or container loading or unloading services, our sister company, Hutchison Logistics, are on hand to help. Hutch Logistics help various importers and exporters to load and unload containers where the goods are delivered in or distributed out using curtain-side trailers, as not all loading and unloading points can receive containers. Next slide, please. So this seminar is not intended to be a detailed guide about actually how to export. The Institute of Export and International Trade can assist you better with that. But there are some other, and there are many other excellent guides available online. But here are some basic consideration from a port operator's perspective. Next slide, please. Trust, information, and planning are key. What at first can seem a daunting prospect can easily be demystified with the right support. Finding a trusted partner is a good place to start. Agents, forwarders, and shipping lines all exist to help you move your cargo. Trying to manage the rules, processes, and charges alone could end up a false economy or end up costing you more time. As a port operator talking to the exporters listening today, I'll now talk about some other common points that you may wish to understand or consider when first setting about exporting. So, having chosen an agent, the next important step is deciding how to get your container safely delivered and booked onto the port. The port uses a community system called Destinate to handle all import and export container information flows. All containers have to be booked using this system that then interacts with the port and other agents in the supply chain, for example, customs, to ensure that each milestone for that container's journey is handled as efficiently as possible. Destinate will match an export container to its intended vessel and show a user when that vessel is due, or indeed when your cargo is safely departed. In terms of container transport, I mentioned earlier Felixstowe offers the most competitive choice in terms of a wide range of haulage operators and rail operators, all based locally. For this part of your container's export journey, you'll often hear the phrases carrier haulage or merchant haulage spoken about. And this is simply referring to differentiation between who is managing each leg of your container's journey from your depot or warehouse until it arrives at your customs facility at its destination. Is it the shipping line, is it the agent, or is it somebody else? Shipping lines have certainly evolved from managing just the seaborne leg of the container's journey, leaving you to manage the transport to and from each port, known as merchant haulage, and are now integrating further into the supply chain, becoming full end-to-end logistics providers, managing the cargo journey throughout, known as line haulage. There are also several large forwarding agents who don't actually operate vessels, but they'll offer a similar one-stop shop service, handling every step of that chain for you. The volume and frequency of the containers you wish to ship and your choice of shipping line or agent will in part influence whether your container moves merchant or line haulage. There's no getting away from it. I'd say our industry loves an acronym. So from VBS, or Vehicle Booking System, the computer system all major UK ports use to both smooth the flow of haulage arrivals whilst verifying all the details of an export container booking are accurate, to VGM, or Verified Gross Mass, the international standard governing the accurate declaration of export container weights, vital to safety at sea, to DGSA, or Dangerous Goods Safety Advisor, the person at the port or shipping line ensuring that all hazardous export cargo is safe to be handled at sea. It's safe to say with all these acronyms it's a minefield, but the port is on hand or has staff on hand who can handle your inquiries and help where possible. And then finally, export receiving dates will be important to you, as these are the earliest and latest date on which your cargo can be received onto the terminal to connect to the vessel or service that you wish to export on. It may seem a small detail, but all of the port services are weekly, meaning a connection is ready whenever you need it. Export receiving dates are generally 7 days in advance of a vessel's estimated time of arrival. From this point, the port will safely accept your container and begin planning for its arrival, its storage, and its loading to its chosen vessel. Next slide, please. So, in addition to specifics for exporting via the Port of Felixstowe, I'd like to provide a short summary of some of the major developments that the Port is investing in right now to support our export customers of today and those of tomorrow. Next slide, please. Firstly, berth deepening. As consumer demand grows year on year, so too has the size of the vessels afloat today. In 2006, Felixstowe welcomed the Emma Maersk to our berths, then declared the biggest container ship in the world at 12,000 TEU capacity. Today, we're regularly welcoming many of the world's largest container vessels at sea, 400 metres long and over 60 metres wide, and close to 24,000 TEU. Indeed, the port's currently planning for the maiden call of the Ever Race, the world's new largest container vessel, this coming weekend. So, as the UK's #1 entry and exit point for containerised cargo, we're investing heavily to meet these market demands. By Q2 next year, the port will have deepened all 4 of our major berths and will increase the width and height of many of our quay cranes just to keep up with escalating vessel sizes. Alongside this, the channel approach to the port will be deepened, ensuring the very biggest ships continue to call at Felixstowe. For UK exporters, this means you'll continue to have the capacity and choice needed to suit all of your requirements, all at Felixstowe. Next slide, please. So rail is ever growing as a unique selling point for Felixstowe's customers versus other UK terminals. Our rail capacity is unmatched, and with there being no sign of let-up in terms of capacity issues within the UK haulage network, and an increasing demand for cost-effective and green transport solutions, rail is an area that we expect to see continue to grow. Our investments inside and outside of the port gate, along with closer partnership with Network Rail and all major freight operators, sees us target 45 services per day in and out, or 90 trains per day over the coming years. For export customers, both contracted and spot hire opportunities are available direct from the rail freight operators. Next slide, please. Lastly, ESG, or environmental, social and governance. Felixstowe has a focus on doing things right as a trading partner. For initiatives and policies as wide as diversity and recruitment in a white, male-dominated industry, the safety of all users who enter the port, we're changing the way we operate to ensure that we're the modern port operator of choice. And our environmental strategy is where we're seeing some of the fastest pace of change, as we shift to new technologies in order to reduce our carbon footprint. In fact, all future port plant will be sourced with alternative or low carbon power options as a prerequisite. This means as more and more exporters view ESG as a critical differentiator when choosing their suppliers, you can be ensured that this is an area which is a high focus for our future. Next slide, please. So thank you for listening. I hope this simple overview has been very useful to you. As I said, it was quite a basic overview, but we're very happy to go into more detail, either in the questions after this or in future. Next slide, please. More information can be found via the Port of Felixstowe or Hutchison Logistics websites, or indeed our port app. It's also possible to subscribe to receive our regular publication for all UK shippers called Ship to Shore. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Adam. A really interesting overview. It's really interesting, particularly the slides about what exporters can do to make sure that they're ready to, well, doing their part of the journey, but also some of the bits at the end there around your kind of ESG goals. Really interesting stuff. If we can move to the next slide, though, before we do go into Q&A, I'm just going to do one last question. No pressure, everyone, but we're just wanting to know how much you now feel informed about the Port of Felixstowe. So the options again range from a little, I feel informed but require more info. I've said it before, you can read it on the screen. But while people are answering that poll, we've had a few really good questions come through already. One from Leslie, who's asking around the congestion issues, which ports obviously were facing. Certainly this time last year it was very much of the news, and it's still on the news at the moment. So she notes particularly around vessels coming from China sometimes missing their port call, incurring extra time on the journey when containers are then offloaded at another European port. I mean, I guess more generally, what is your view of the situation at ports in the UK at present, and when do you think exports will be back on schedule?
Sure, yeah, thanks, Leslie. I think it's such a complicated problem. And there's so many factors to it. It's demand versus supply, the COVID impact on the market itself, the COVID impact on labour supply at UK ports and European or global ports, vessels being out of position or waiting to access ports, which takes capacity out of the marketplace, poor vessel schedule reliability, container equipment being out of position, capacity issues within terminals, and certainly terminals having their yards full of import cargo, in part linked to the current haulage crunch that we're seeing, and then freight rates, of course, which will be a hot topic for many of those listening today. I would say that if you go back just pre-COVID, what we had was a fragile conveyor belt, one that worked well. COVID was a big disruptor that came along. And then since then, we've had minor aftershocks in the UK, like our lockdowns affecting consumer demand or changing the type of consumer demand, what was out there. We've had the impact of COVID more recently in Yantian and Ningbo in China. That will then have a knock-on effect in the UK. And of course, the Suez crisis, which put container shipping well into the media spotlight.
It's a really interesting
So
area. I mean,
right now, the
sorry,
conveyor belt is far off being a smooth flow. Yeah, go on.
sorry, Adam.
Yes,
It's
Will.
there's a slight pause in the sound for some reason, but yeah, it's a really interesting area. And I'm just wondering, Kevin, in terms of what traders can do to mitigate around some of the potential impacts, what can they be looking to do?
Yeah, I guess there's a couple of things. Certainly planning, forecasting. So look at demand planning, what your requirements are. Clearly, a lot's been sort of talked about in the context of COVID about having resilience and different options in the supply chain. So I know some businesses have considered that, but it's very much worth reviewing that. Is there an over reliance on one supplier? But as I say, forward planning as well. So what do I need in my supply chain? And clearly there's cash flow impacts of forward ordering or having extra stock. So that has to be managed as well. But do consider resilience in the supply chain, forward planning as two key elements that need to be done.
And Kevin, do you think there is a general move from, I just hear in the media is talked from just in time to just in case? Do you think that is something which is happening?
I think it's happening in some businesses. Clearly, it also depends on the actual sector. Probably one of the biggest influences is cash flow, is the ability to do that, because clearly holding stock costs money for businesses. But also then try and think of that in the context of payment terms. Are there different payment terms that I can bring in that try and assist my cash flow and my working capital? And it's all very well saying, well, consider documentary letters of credit. Potentially, possibly either term or usance letters of credit if you can pay at a later date, or documentary bank collections. So there are potential instruments that you can consider there to actually help and try and smooth the cash flow impact for your business.
Excellent, thanks both. That's a really thorough answer, I think. So I hope that's been helpful, Leslie. I'm just going to share the response to the poll very quickly. I think that's pretty good. I think most people feel as though they've had some information. As Adam said, this was an overview which was given. So for those requiring more information, either you can contact the Port of Felixstowe, or we'll be running further webinars with them over the next few months. So plenty of opportunity to find out more. So if we move to the next, we are going to be doing the Q&As now. So the first, next question we've had in is from Lucinda, who asks, what is your view on the haulage shortage in the UK at the moment, and what is needed to end it? So I'm going to pass that to Adam to start with.
Thanks, Will. Yeah, I think it's a problem that's been building some time, like the COVID issue we're talking about. Industry's long had a problem in getting new entrants. The solution will be complicated. Pay conditions will certainly need to improve for the hauliers, who some of them in containers certainly are expected to leave their house on a Monday morning very early and won't get back till late on a Friday, if not Saturday. In the short term, it's a massive problem for the port. I think we're now seeing lots of media coverage of shortages of stock in supermarkets, but it doesn't take it back to the first stage here, which is getting the containers off the port or from the DCs in the first instance. The source of this in terms of Brexit and drivers going home, or the COVID impact on drivers shifting towards working for the likes of the supermarkets or Amazon, are well publicised, as is the backup of the amount of tests that are out there at the moment that the government is trying to unravel. It's a huge issue for us. I mean, Felixstowe normally from an import perspective would have containers would dwell in Felixstowe on average about 4.5 days. Right now they're dwelling for about 7 days. That doesn't sound like a lot, an extra 2.5 days, but across 30,000 plus imports on port at any one time, and you can see Felixstowe starts to fill up, and we need that good flow of haulage to be able to collect those containers from us to keep the port breathing. It's not an issue unique to the UK. I know they've got colleagues in European ports suffering the same, and some of the work I've done in North America, I know this is a very real issue. issue in America and Canada as well. Locally, Felixstowe, a great solution, and one we're focusing on right now, is rail. We are trying to move as many boxes as we can via rail and support the 3 major freight operators and all of the shipping lines and major rail users with that. But I think it's a multi-layered solution in terms of making such a critical part of the supply chain and such an important job more attractive to new entrants. And I know the government, certainly the Port of Felixstowe, we are talking regularly to the government about how they can unblock that, unblock the blockage of driving tests that are waiting to be taken.
It's a really interesting topic. I mean, Kevin, from your kind of relationships to forwarders, what's your view from them?
Yeah, it's an interesting and a difficult topic, and I think I always admire hauliers and freight forwarders for the fantastic work that they do, and I think they, if you like, the recognition, the paying conditions is very important, not just for each individual haulier or freight forwarder, but across the industry as a whole. So that recognition is really, really important, and definitely needed. I think some of the factors that Adam's gone through are also very, very important as well. And again, if you're a trading business, very much bear that in mind in you having goods to move and managing your supply chain. So it is a very difficult moment in the industry, but we do hope there's greater recognition, as we've seen in the customs world, but greater recognition of the great role that the industry participants are playing.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Rafe. I hope that's been a helpful answer there, Lucinda. If we move to the next slide, because our next question actually alludes to one of the future topics. So we've had a couple of questions about Freeport East. Adam, I'm not sure if you'll be the best person to ask, because I know we do have Mark joining us in a couple of months. But Angus has asked, when do you think we'll hear more from Freeport East about sort of services they'll be doing? And Miles has asked, when will HMRC's expectations of those who want to be set up in a Freeport be clarified? So maybe, Adam, if you want to start on that question, or those 2 questions, and we can bring in Kevin as well after.
Sure, yeah. I think the devil in the detail is still coming. So Freeport's clearly a key government policy, very well publicised. Perhaps some of the PR was ahead of the policy, and that's all still being put together now in the background. It's not straightforward. Lots of changes and puzzle pieces need to be put in place to see the Freeports come into full fruition. And it's something that a lot of our shipping line customers ask us regularly, what's in it for me? And I think from a logistics and production supply chain perspective, there will be some advantages, whether they're tax-based advantages or advantages that are helping them with their customs processes. And I think all of that will help facilitate trade in the UK in the 8 Freeports that are out there. But we deliberately put webinar number 4 as Freeport East at the end of the year, because we're expecting more information to come. And as we work in partnership with Harwich International Port, but also the local councils and the other large businesses who are part of the Freeport East bid, we will regularly update more information as we can.
Thanks, Adam. And Kevin, I mean, in terms of what you know from Freeports in other countries and what you've heard from HMRC so far, in terms of the required setup tasks or requirements, what would you expect? Is there any kind of information we can glean at this point?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, because what the UK is trying to do, and the successful bidders is create something that doesn't exist currently. What we do have is we have some good templates, some Freeports, successful Freeports in other parts of the world, such as Tangier Med in Morocco, Miami, and Singapore, etc. So we do have all the templates that we can refer to as a nation. Clearly, HMRC and customs is one part of it, but there are other parts of, if you like, the Freeport proposition as well. But as we're going to talk about in the context of Freeports, it's a wonderful opportunity to look at best practice. So no requirements for guarantees for inward processing, customs warehousing, possible use of the authorized economic operator AEO umbrella, flexibility on possibly even data sets within customs declaration. So there's a lot of flexibility that can possibly be introduced within the Freeport arena, and it's a wonderful opportunity, I think, for the United Kingdom and for the Freeport operators to really introduce something innovative as well, and clearly focus on certain sectors, whether that's medical, renewable energy, clean energy. There's really great opportunities there for free ports, but it will take some time. There is the legislation aspect, there's interpretation of customs and trade aspects as well. But it is a wonderful opportunity, and it's one that businesses should very much be considering now. How can I operate? How does the supply chain operate within this free port area, but also outside of the free port area in the immediate vicinity as well?
Excellent, really interesting. Watch this space, I think, is definitely one tip for everyone there. Question now from Harry, who's asked, this is for Adam. He's asked, as an exporter, are you able to give me more export free time?
Okay, good question. Good question. This comes down to the export receiving that I touched on in the presentation. So it's most services that call Felixstowe are weekly. I guess the shipping lines that you deal with, or the agents you would deal with, Harry, would sell you a slot on a particular week's call. The challenge that we're seeing right now in all the UK terminals and European terminals is that vessels can run late. And in Felixstowe particularly, we assure that we always have one vessel for each service open for an exporter to deliver their cargo to. But if we've got a vessel open and another call is still due, it's very difficult for the port to have two vessels open simultaneously for the same service. We store our export containers using certain rules, that the vessel, the berth the vessel is going to berth on, the weight of the containers, the size of the containers, the destination. So if we have two vessels open for the same service simultaneously, there'll be clashes in the yard. It'll be very inefficient for us. There'll be we would have to dig out containers when we're loading a vessel, which is slow, or we may have to store export containers further away from the intended berth, which will again slow down the loading of the vessel. So information about the export receiving is available on the port's website in terms of closing times, or via Destinate as well. But it's a case that we are a fast flowing container yard, not a storage depot. So we need to continue to have the cargo on our quay for the 7 days up until the vessel that's due to ship on arrives. We can't hold multiple vessels cargo simultaneously for the same service. I hope that answers, Harry.
I hope so. And Harry, obviously, feel free to get in touch if you've got any follow-up to that. But really, it seems like a very thorough answer anyway, so I hope that's been helpful. We've got a couple more which have come through. A question from Miles, and again, this may not be your specific area of expertise, Adam, but you touched on it in the presentation a little bit. So he's asked, will Hutchison be looking at investing in electrolyzation, i.e. the production of hydrogen? And I guess this feeds into the government's hydrogen strategy as well.
Yeah, indeed. I'll give you a brief answer on that. Hydrogen and future energy is very much part of our Freeport East bid. So that's incredibly positive that we're looking at decarbonisation going forwards. From a port perspective and operations on the terminal, we've
Adam, we lost you about
invested a
halfway
lot
through
of
that
time,
sentence.
money and thought in the past few years in shifting away from diesel power to alternative fuel sources. And a lot of
Sorry, Adam, it's just gone slightly glitchy. Do you want to turn your webcam off and then try again with that question? It's the sound just paused a couple of times, certainly my end.
Sure. Okay. Understand. I'll pick it up from the port's perspective. We've invested a lot of time, thought and money into moving away or moving forward our decarbonisation agenda. But unfortunately, at the moment, technology isn't quite up in terms of hydrogen-powered yard cranes, hydrogen-powered internal movement vehicles. They are being developed and we're looking at them, but we're moving a lot more towards electric internal movement vehicles at the moment. But the knowledge and the information that we share as part of the Freeport East bid is definitely looking very positive for us going forwards.
Great, thanks, Adam. I hope that's been helpful. Miles, it's a really interesting area, so I'm sure there'll be plenty more information to come on that online and so on. We'll do a couple more questions. Question again for Adam. Martin has asked, is there a warehouse facility within Felixstowe Port for load lightening or repalletization of containers?
Simple answer is yes, there are, both on port and very close by. again, Hutchison Logistics can help with that directly, or we can put Martin in contact with other people who can help that out as well. So yes, indeed, there are people both on site and very close by. Names of some of those operators on our website, but also on the Felixstowe Port Users Association website. But if Martin wants to contact us directly using the inquiries website, that was part of the slide deck, we can answer that question directly for him.
Thanks, Adam. And we're going to do a poll in a minute for which you can ask for further contact as well if you've got any more queries. Last question is from Ali, this is for Kevin, I think. It's an Incoterms question. It's always love an Incoterms questions on these webinars. So he's asked, I export to Spain X works. Customers asked me to do the UK customs declaration as they are not registered in the UK. His question is, what Incoterms should it be using?
So if you are making the customs declaration, then let's take this stage back. If it's X works, the responsibility for the customs declaration is from your Spanish customer. More realistically, if they want you to make the customs declaration, it should be FCA that's used as an alternative. So, for example, FCA your premises, Incoterms 2020. So that's more appropriate, and you should also, I guess, bear in mind with X Works that if it is your customer who makes the customs declaration, which it is their responsibility to, if they were to do that, that they would have control of all the documentation. You would require evidence of the customs declaration for purposes of proof of export to 0 rate VAT and also upon customs audit. So if you are going to be responsible for the customs declaration, then FCA would be a more appropriate Incoterm to use.
Thanks, Kevin. I hope that's been helpful, Ali. And obviously, we at the Institute actually do training on Incoterms. So if you have any further interest in that as a topic, then please do look at the website for more information. But that was our last question. So I'm just going to ask one last question of our audience, which is, do you wish to share your contact details with, I think it's fair to say, our partner, Hutchison Ports, for more help and guidance on using ports such as Felixstowe? And the options there are yes or no. I'm going to leave that on as we wrap up. So as you leave the webinar, thank you once again to Kevin and Adam for the presentations today. Really interesting presentation, a topic I certainly didn't know all that much about, and I hope everyone has found it useful. As you would have seen on the previous slide, we do have more webinars coming up with Hutchison. You can sign up to the next one on the role of rail freight in supply chains, and that's already on our website at export.org.uk/webinars. That's towards the end of September. You'll also shortly see details of our other upcoming webinars on with Hutchison. They include the topics of the changes since Brexit and the opportunities that Freeports present to traders, including Freeport East, which we answered a question on earlier. For now, though, thank you everyone for tuning in. We really look forward to seeing you in the next one. I'm going to leave the line open for a couple more minutes so you can answer this poll as you exit. There's also an exit survey at the end, so let us know what you thought of today's webinar. But for now, goodbye, everyone.